are in the house. Yes, in the house. Because on today's episode, our guest is a broadcast captioner and car provider, Regina DeMoville. Regina is a perfectionist in everything that she does, and she will share with us how that has affected her time in school and her certification process. Regina is a compassionate entrepreneur, mother, and wife who manages to find the time to volunteer in the Steno community by mentoring students, allowing reporters to intern with her as she provides captions. Regina has also held various positions for various national and state court reporting associations.
Regina, are you ready to go on the record?
I am ready. Let's do this.
Now, Regina, take a few seconds and fill in some blanks. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Who is Regina?
So I am a mother of two, well, actually three. I have a stepson. He's 24, and I'm currently 36 weeks pregnant, and it's very exciting for me because I never thought I would have kids. So my husband and I had an angel baby last year, so we're very excited for this baby. Hopefully he'll come soon. We have two dogs. We like to go camping, hiking, anything outdoor, really. The beach is our favorite camping. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, cool. So now we'll talk a little bit more about your Steno life. So let's start where it all started, I guess. How did you even hear about court reporting or stenography?
So I was a senior in high school, and one of my senior classes was telling us, to find different careers that we liked. And I sat out with a few different career paths. And my dad actually was looking on the internet, and he came across court reporting, and he approached me about it and said they type fast and make good money. And at the time, I loved typing on the computer. Back then, AOL had first came out and instant messaging was a popular thing. So I was on Instant Messenger all the time, and I typed about 80 to 90 words per minute on a regular keyboard. So my dad just figured that it would be a good fit for me.
And obviously he was right. Parents know best.
Yes.
And so did you go to Steno school directly after high school?
I did. So I graduated high school in June, and I started court reporting school the next April.
Okay. And then at what school did you start?
I went to Sage College in Moreno Valley, California, and I took my entrance exam at the California School of Court Reporting, which was Sage before they transitioned to the new name of Sage College.
What was the entrance exam all about? What they have you do there?
Basically, it was just a 101 exam asking, a little bit about vocabulary, English, things like that they would teach within the court reporting program.
And so you started in April. What theory were you learning?
I learned NCRS Theory.
How long is the NCRS Theory?
It took about 6 months to learn the theory.
And was that 6 months going to class face-to-face full time?
Yes, I went to school during the day.
Monday through Friday?
Yes.
And then how long did it take you to graduate with that schedule?
So me personally, it took me 2 years to get to 200 words per minute. And then it took me a year and a half to pass the qualifier, only because my school offered the qualifier only once a week. And being that I was such a perfectionist, if I felt myself dropping or making a mistake, even if it was just one or two, I would get nervous and feel like I was failing. And most of the time I would just give up instead of keep going. So it took me a year and a half to pass the qualifier, which would make it 3.5 years to get to the state exam. And then it took me another year and a half to pass all 3 portions of the state exam. So 5 years total.
Okay. And then in retrospect, what do you think you could have done differently to make it a shorter start to finish time?
Definitely not giving up as quickly. So like I said, the qualifier was once a week, and it was on Fridays, which I think was bad as far as on the school's part, just because, Fridays you're looking forward to the weekend, you want to go home, you're tired from all the practicing during the week. So in my opinion, Fridays wasn't the best day to give a qualifier. But for me personally, I shouldn't have looked at it like that. I should have, taken it more seriously and not, even though it was a Friday and I might have been tired or looked forward to the weekend, I should have been, more serious about the exam and not have given up, even if I made a couple mistakes, because I probably would have passed a lot sooner if I would have just kept going.
It seems that it was more of a mindset issue and not even a Steno issue that you were experiencing.
Yeah, it definitely was. And that's a piece of advice that I give students in qualifying is just don't give up, just keep going. Because I was passing, practice qualifiers left and right. It was just test anxiety, when they said, okay, it's the test, I would get nervous and I, like I said, I would give up. So it was definitely a mindset thing.
So do you think that in retrospect, do you think that you should have transcribed every test that you had during the qualifiers, or just in general in your whole schooling career?
Definitely transcribe every test. I feel like even if you don't pass the test, you definitely learn from your mistakes. And if you don't transcribe, you don't learn. So it's important to understand the mistakes that you're making on these tests. It'll only help you later.
I 100% agree. I feel like every test is, even if it's pass or fail, it's always the answer key to passing the next test. I just think a lot of times we're scared to transcribe because we don't really want to face failure. If it really is, if it's anything below a 95 or 96%, if we don't transcribe, we could always just believe, oh, I could have passed if X, Y, or Z, but we never want to admit to ourselves that, hey, there are things that we still need to work on so that we can be certified or working or moving to the next speed level.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're a society of, we want things now. And so I think that's really the hardest part about court reporting is it's constant failure back to back, and people, don't like that. They can't handle the constant rejection, but it's really important to have those failures because it gets you one step closer to that pass. And once you pass, when you get a pass in, any speed, 140, 160, you're so excited in that moment. And then when you get the next fail, you say to yourself, oh, I can't do this, or, this wasn't meant for me, or, you get those negative thoughts again. But then once you get to the end and you pass your state exam, all of that goes away. It doesn't matter. You got there, you passed. So again, I think it's another mindset thing.
So let's talk a little bit about your writing style. So you learned the NCRS theory. How do you have any opinions on that theory?
A lot of the theory is writing things out. I don't know if there's another theory that I can really compare it to because I never learned another theory. But, I wrote a lot of things out. We did get phrases and briefs in school. But as I got into my career as a captioner, I started noticing that a lot of the briefs and phrases that I learned weren't really helpful to me because they were legal phrases or legal briefs. So for me as a captioner, I do brief things that come up common. So, for example, in broadcast captioning, which is television captioning, if you're captioning the news and they say good morning, or maybe things about the weather that come up in every newscast, things like that are constantly said in every newscast, those are really important to brief. They help your speed tremendously. So I use a mixture of both, writing things out and briefing and phrasing.
How different are you from what you were taught? Like, how different is your writing from the NCRS theory now?
I wouldn't say that I veered off too much. There were a few things, for example, brief families. They gave you a list of briefs that were in a so-called family. And there were a few times where I felt some of the briefs didn't make sense with the other brief family or family of briefs. So, there were a few things over my career that I've changed, but I don't think it was anything drastic. I pretty much write the same. And it's pretty similar to other theories, I think, because, when I write something in Steno, let's say on Facebook or something, people can pretty much tell what I'm trying to write. So I don't feel like I write much different than anyone else.
So I want to go back to your education. So after you took your qualifiers, you sat for the state exam, and then obviously you passed the state exam, but now you're doing captioning. So tell us a little bit about that. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I passed the machine portion of the state exam my first time with 12 errors. So you can see just in that my writing was really good at the time, and it was just a matter of test anxiety. For me, the written portions of the state exam were the harder parts. And I actually started heart captioning while I was still in school. So I was doing carts in high speeds through the end of schooling, through the state exam. And then I continued to do that while I was waiting for my results. And then once I received my CSR exam, my CSR license, I of course wanted to try depositions, and I branched out and I did depos for about 9 months, and I just didn't like it as much. I was having to drive very far from home, at least a 2 to 3 hour drive one way. In the beginning, you get all the jobs that no one else wants, or the jobs that are small where you get a minimum, where veteran reporters don't want those types of jobs. So I felt like I was just driving so much and not making any money. So, being that I had already been doing heart captioning, I just fell in love with it from the very beginning. The deaf community is so appreciative of good quality captions. And, when you provide them a good service, they tell you things like, thank you so much for doing this for me today. Or, if you're with a student throughout the whole semester, they tell you things like, I couldn't have done this class without you, things like that. And, in the short 9 months that I did depos, I never, ever received any kind of compliment like that from an attorney. So it was just a different feeling, really.
So in retrospect, do you think doing those depositions, was that a good idea, or do you wish you didn't have that experience?
I definitely don't regret the experience. I think it just put the cherry on top for me to know that I didn't want to do the legal side of things. I went through a legal battle when I first started years ago with a family member, and to see that side of like the court system, that also kind of deterred me from the legal setting. So, captioning just, it took a piece of my heart, and it gives you this fuzzy feeling at the end of the day that I didn't feel I got out of the legal field.
So another, I guess, retrospect question is, you mentioned that when you learned theory, you were taught briefs and you were taught phrases, but most of them were for the legal system. I feel personally that there isn't a lot of Steno education, like from start to finish, geared towards people who are interested in working as broadcast captioners or as CART providers. You mentioned that when you were in school, even though you were taught briefs and phrases, a lot of them were really geared towards the legal aspect of stenography. And I'm just wondering, what do you think could be done differently or done to help people who want to start working as a closed captioner from these schools from the time they start theory to the end?
So I do think that a lot of the court reporting schools do not teach CART or broadcast captioning training. Some have implemented some sort of training, which is good. I wish all of them would implement, some kind of training. But at this point, I think it's a matter of the student, sitting out with captioners, learning about the career field. If they are interested in doing captioning at the end, then, a lot of practice to the TV would be good. If their school doesn't offer any kind of training, really the hands-on thing is the most important right now, I think.
At what level should they start practicing to television?
Well, I think higher speeds would be better, just because broadcast captioning is so much faster than, CART captioning. Usually CART is a normal conversation, whether it's, a school setting, whether it's a webinar or a, training at a workplace. Most stuff like that is a normal conversation, which is about 180 to 200 words a minute. But broadcast captioning is really, 225 is the low speed. We shoot up to 240, 260, 280 at constantly throughout the programs, whether it be news or sporting events or, other types of broadcast shows. So I think really, higher speed students would be the best time to start practicing at least broadcast captioning, because you might not be able to keep up with it, but you'll get to learn, the way that newscasters speak, or the way that, sports shows are handled, or, a lot of sports talk shows have, more than two anchors. A lot of sports shows have a bunch of men that get fired up about sports and they talk over each other, and, they're constantly interrupting. So it's just different than, a normal conversation would be with, two speakers or even one speaker.
And you mentioned that to intern with captioners or sitting out with captioners. Where do we find these captioners that when we're ready to sit in, whether we're a student or a working reporter looking to transition into captioning?
Yeah, so one resource would be your school. If you absolutely don't know a captioner, you can ask your school to, put you in touch with a captioner. A lot of schools, follow their students out of school and follow what they're doing. If that doesn't work, you can reach out to your state association. So, like for California, it would be CCRA, but every state has their own association. If you can't get a hold of your state association, I'm sure you could reach out to NCRA, the national association, and they could put you in touch with a captioner. But yeah, there's Facebook groups, there's, all kinds of resources to help you find someone to sit in with.
And if you're sitting in with somebody, does it have to be in person or could it be virtually?
No, it can definitely be virtually. So I do that. Actually, I've mentored many students or reporters looking to transition into captioning. And what I do is I use a program called TeamViewer. And basically, it's a screen sharing program, and it allows you to hear my audio as well. So I will have, a person, they don't necessarily have to be in California. I've mentored a lot of students outside of California, but they, log into TeamViewer, they're able to see my screen and hear my audio, and then they are able to practice along with me. And I think that's really good for people, to actually see someone in action, see, someone that they know captioning something versus just turning on the TV and watching the closed captions. It's good to be able to hear the audio at the same time as well. So you can see, like, if I paraphrase something, or if I, dropped a little word, or if you didn't hear something and, I heard it and I wrote it and you're like, oh, that's what they said. Just things like that. It's good to have that hands-on experience.
So is there a delay when you're doing the captioning? Because I know sometimes, just like you said, somebody can say something and you feel like you don't know what they said. And then 2 seconds later, like, oh yeah, that's what the person said. Is there any sort of delay, or is there any type of speed? Is the speed controlled in any type of sense? Like maybe it's played 10% slower, 10% faster. Is it 100% live?
Live captioning is 100% live. So we would call into the actual audio line for whatever station we're captioning to, or if we're captioning a sporting event, we would connect directly to their live audio feed. So there's no delay. However, within the captioning software, we can set a delay of how many seconds we want the encoder to hold the captions before they go out. Or actually it would be modem, not encoder. But for me, I think I have it set at 4 strokes for 2 seconds, which means when I write something, it will hold 4 words for 2 seconds before it spits it out to the encoder. So there is a slight delay, which is about 2 seconds on live television. And that's how you can tell if something's captioned live or if it's captioned if it's pre-recorded and pre-captioned, because live stuff will always have a delay in the captions and pre-recorded stuff won't. So, if you're watching a talk show or something like that that was pre-recorded, when they say something, the captions will already be up on the screen. But for a live show, one of the biggest complaints that people have about the captions is that the anchor will say something and then the captions will come out, a few seconds later, or, when they talk about a story, the captions are still on the previous story. It's nothing, too big. I know it kind of, from a consumer standpoint, it is not a good thing because you're trying to pay attention to the captions and the story that's on the screen. But in reality, it's really not that much of a delay. It's about 2 to 3 seconds.
So now, are you working full-time as an employee or as an independent contractor for a captioning company?
So currently I am an independent contractor. I do have my own business as well. So I have my own clients, but I do work for other agencies. And I have worked as an employee in the past, but I prefer the independent contractor life much more. It gives me flexibility. When I need to take time off, it allows me to do so. And now that, that I'm hopefully having a baby soon, it will allow me to, to adjust my schedule to, things that I need to do with the baby, family events or, things like that. I really just love the independent contractor life so much more. But being an employee, you do have a set schedule. An independent contractor, you're not guaranteed hours. The pay rate is a little bit different for independent versus employee, because as an employee, you get, health insurance, they take taxes out, things like that. As an independent contractor, you don't have any of that. So it's just, it's different and everyone has their thing. There's some people that want to be employees to have that security, the same paycheck every 2 weeks, or they want to make sure that they have health insurance and, have paid vacation. But as an independent contractor, if like for me, I'm on my husband's insurance. So, I don't necessarily need my own insurance. So the independent contractor life for me is just a little better. So it just depends on your lifestyle and, what works best for you.
In the last 2 years, what's been the breakdown of the type of work that you perform, whether it's broadcast captioning or CART? What is it that you tend to do?
So I personally do both. I love doing both because it gives me a mixture of both worlds. Broadcast captioning, I used to do a lot of news. And, for me, just doing constant news every day, it's, the news can be depressing a lot of times. There's stories about shootings and, just different kind of stuff. Right now we're dealing with this coronavirus outbreak and, it's the only thing you're seeing on the news right now. So captioning that, every day, all day is it kind of gets to your emotions. So for me, I love doing both. And I do a mixture of everything. I do college classes, I do remote webinars. One of my favorite things to caption is big conventions. So most of those are done on site, but some of them can be done remotely. But those are one of my favorites to caption.
So over the past 14 years, what has been your favorite assignment that you've ever done?
I'm pretty positive that my favorite assignment had to be the wedding that I captioned a few years ago. I was contacted by someone who, was having a wedding, and the mother of the bride was deaf, and she, they lived in a different country. They wanted to come to America to watch their daughter get married, and they were worried. The mother was worried about not having access, not being able to hear and have conversations with family and friends at the wedding, and not being able to hear her daughter's vows, and, not being able to really participate in the wedding. When I first took the assignment, I just looked at it as any other assignment. But when I actually got there and I met this woman, and, I set up and I captioned, the entire wedding for her. And then after I captioned, side conversations, personal conversations that she had with family and friends, and just seeing the emotion that she had in the moment, being able to participate and actually, and have access to, to talk with other people. for me, it was just so rewarding, and it was so emotional for me just to know that I gave this woman this experience to have with her family on such a special day. So I think that by far is definitely my greatest memory in my career.
So when you were providing cart at the wedding, did you feel that you were part of the wedding, or did you feel like an outsider? How did that go?
Well, I didn't feel part of the wedding, but I definitely felt welcome. This family was so accommodating to me, whatever I needed, a chair or, an outlet, the venue where the wedding was held, they were very accommodating for me as well. Of course, when you're at an event like that as a professional, you're a little nervous to, go to the bathroom or, get something to eat. And they were very sweet and welcoming. And, when they saw me sitting, not having anything to do, they would, come up to me and offer me a drink or offer me, when the food was ready, they said, "Oh, please help yourself," and they were very, very welcoming to me. So I definitely never felt like an outsider. And the more that I got to know the family and hang out with them and interact with them, it was amazing for sure.
Now let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum. Is there a job or assignment that you would consider the worst experience? And if so, what made it so horrible?
Yeah, definitely. We all have bad assignments or bad moments in our careers. And I actually have two that I can share with you, one in CART and one in broadcast. So very early on in my CART career, I was a fairly new captioner, and I was in a college setting with a student, and I'm captioning away what the professor is saying. I can't even remember what type of class it was, but I'm captioning away, and all of a sudden my student just blurts out, "What is this?" and points to my screen and is making this huge, scene in front of the whole class. And I look up at my screen, and there is an Untranslate, on my screen. And it was only one, on the whole screen, but she's making, a big deal out of it. And it was really embarrassing for me just because, I was new and I didn't know how to handle situations like that. So it was a little intimidating, but, I got through it. And I think from that I learned, not to take things so personal. And, I think at that point I realized why it's so important to have good real time in captioning. I think most students are definitely understand if you have one or two untrans here and there, but, this particular student was a perfectionist. And when something didn't come out right, in this case, she made a scene. And so for me, it showed me the importance of having everything translate on the screen and why real time is so important. And then for broadcast captioning, early in my career, I was new to the captioning software, because in broadcast captioning, you have to use you can use the same software you're on, but there's a captioning software that you have to utilize in order to connect to, stations or things like that. And I was not 100% familiar with the software yet. And there's a key that you push on your computer that will block the captions from going out. And I had pushed the button, and I was globaling something. In particular, I was globaling the word harass. For whatever reason, I misstroked it and it didn't come out correctly. And when I went back on the air and I pushed that button to unblock the captions, the words "her ass" went out on air. And it was quite embarrassing, and I figured I would get fired after that. But luckily, no one at the station caught it, and I was able to keep my job. But it was definitely a learning experience to watch your screen and make sure that you clear the captions before you go back on air. So
that is so funny. I feel so immature because I think it's so funny, but I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, and we all definitely have moments like that. So yeah, you definitely learn from it though.
So Regina, can you share with our listeners what is the best Steno related advice you've ever received?
I think for me, the best advice I've received is know your worth. And the reason why I feel that's important is, I personally am such a nice person. I am, willing to go out of my way for people, especially, owning my own captioning business. When I first got started a few years ago, I wanted to do everything for free. I offered my services for free just to get my name out there, and clients, let's say nonprofit organizations would contact me and say, they didn't have a big budget for captioning, and if I could lower my prices to accommodate them. In the beginning, yes, I did that. And after a while, I started realizing that those jobs were some of the worst jobs that I've had. The people end up, treating you bad, or, they don't value your service as much because they're not paying you for it. So, later in my career, when I started, realizing that no, if I actually keep to my worth, people take you more seriously. And when I started to, when people would ask me, can you lower your rates or can we negotiate? And I would say no, I actually found that a lot more people would say, okay, and they would, go with my rates, or they would stick with me. And so for me, it was really important that I finally realized my worth and to stick with that.
Now, is there any advice that you would give to any future real-timers out there, maybe any students that are looking into getting into captioning, or any core reporters that are wanting to make the transition?
I think the most important thing that I'll say is don't be afraid of real time. Whether you're doing real time in the legal field, depositions, or court, or you're going into captioning, which is 100% real time. There's a learning curve in everything, and this is nothing different. When you get your license and you go out and do depos and you're not doing real time, it's still important to try to do real time for yourself, so that you don't have as much editing time later. But then once you start doing it for attorneys or, clients, it gives you that much more of a rewarding feeling of knowing that you're, producing a clean transcript for an attorney, or, a clean notes for, a student in college, or, someone who is completely deaf who, relies on clean captions. So really real time can be your best friend and not your enemy. So, just go with the flow and start real timing for yourself early, even in school, or if you're already a reporter looking to transition into captioning, just do it. Just make the leap of faith. And I'm definitely a believer that, you have to have people there that do real time to support you. And, if you have to have that real time support system behind you, because, you're definitely going to have days where you feel like you can't do this, or you'll never be good enough to do real time. But, I was there as well. And I even had people tell me that I would never be good enough. And, I just went for it, and it turned out to be an amazing career choice for me. So don't give up.
Thank you so much, Regina, for that advice and all the advice that you've given us through this entire podcast, and the tips, and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners do too. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, of course. It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me on this podcast. And I wish you, luck in future podcasts. It's awesome to share my captioning story, and hopefully, we'll get a lot more people interested in captioning after this. So thank you.